can't see, but welcome to you all and delighted to have you here. So my friend tonight is Wendy Kirk, and if you saw the little flyer that went out, you'll know that she works at the Glasgow Women's Library, which is a very unusual library. There are only two, I think, in the country, two women's libraries, and this is one of them. And I was really lucky to get a chance to go there and meet Wendy and the wonderful project that she runs there, which is called Story Cafe, which she's going to tell us about tonight. So Wendy, we met, it was about 4 years ago, was it?
I think so, yeah.
2016, yes. And I'd heard about Story Cafe from a friend who had been there and spoken to them, and it sounded lovely. So I boldly got in touch with Wendy and said, would it be possible for me to come? And she was very welcoming. And so I made the journey out to Glasgow, and then there we were in her lovely library. So Wendy, first of all, say a few words about yourself and how you came to be doing this work.
Sure, thanks, Marion. Well, I grew up in the Highlands and moved down to Glasgow to study English at university, and sort of ended up staying in the city. And after I finished my course, I left. I wasn't really sure what I was going to do. I ended up doing some community work for quite a few years, and really one day was just happened to be flicking through a university sort of course book and prospectus, and saw a course for library studies, and I was like, oh, it's like a light bulb moment. And I thought, wow, you can actually study to work in a library. I thought, why have I never thought of that before? Because I love people and I love books, so that's bringing those together. So I duly applied, studied for a year at Strathclyde University, and I was doing a job in a sort of an area of librarianship that wasn't really what I wanted to do, and saw in the Big Issue, I remember looking through for jobs when people looked through newspapers and magazines for jobs, and saw an advert for the Women's Library, and I was like, oh, I'm going to apply for that, thinking, oh, I'll probably not get an interview. And then got an interview, and I thought, I'll give it my best shot, but I'll probably not get it. And then I remember just feeling just so elated when I got the phone call to say that I had got the job. And that's really been me. I've been there for 16 years now, and I've been the library's first paid librarian. So it's been a really amazing job, and just kind of everything I would want.
That's very interesting that you're the first paid person, but the library was up and running, all run by volunteers before, was it?
Yeah. So I can tell you a little bit about the library. The library, we're coming up now for our 30th anniversary. It's going to be next year. And for the first 10 years, the library was running with no paid staff whatsoever, completely run and sustained by volunteers, which is an amazing achievement.
Amazing.
So when I started working at the library, there was about 5 members of staff, and we have sort of grown, and now there's over 22 paid members of staff, and we've moved to 3 different buildings, and we're now in a sort of permanent premises in the East End of Glasgow. So the library really is, we're called Glasgow Women's Library, but we work across the whole of Scotland. We're open to everyone, not just to women, and we are more than what we say, just a library, in the sense that we have museum collection, we have an archive collection, and we are running different groups and activities and courses and events, mainly for women in our library. So we kind of do more than what our name might suggest.
So tell me about what makes it a women's library rather than a library?
Yes, that's a good question. So our focus is very much on celebrating the lives and the histories and the achievements of women. Our collections are all focused on women, and so everything we have is donated. We have never had a budget for any of our collections. So all of the materials that you'll find in our archive and museum store and on our shelves in the library have been donated by thousands of supporters, all about, you know, feminism, women's history, art, politics, women in an international context, women in music, lots of different topics. So I think our focus is very much on celebrating women and what women do and what women have achieved.
So it's the contents of the library that makes it specifically a women's library.
Yeah, and our learning is very much tied into the collections. So all our courses and our events are really celebrating women writers, women creatives, women's history. So you'll see that reflected in our learning programme. But we're open to everyone. So, you know, we want everyone to come and visit us and to access our amazing collections. Because we feel that everyone should know about women's achievements and women's history.
Well, we are half the population, aren't we?
Yeah.
So when you say it's come from donations and all free gifts, basically, what sort of people have given books and artifacts and so on to the library?
Just like everyone, people from all different backgrounds and with all different stories. You know, we have people who donate one book that's really been hugely meaningful to them. We have people who donate perhaps their mum or their partner's books in their will. We have different women's organisations and campaigning groups who have donated things like newsletters or badges or banners or things that they've used in sort of campaigns. So it can really vary between groups, between individual women. And people donate for lots of different reasons as well. So whether it be they have somewhere that they know these materials will be preserved, or they want to share a book that they've loved that's been really important to them. So that makes it a really lovely collection to work with.
Absolutely.
Because it's really
if any of the 200 plus people who are listening are busy clearing out their bookshelves and trying to reduce what they've got, what would you? I mean, how if you were to receive donations from them, would you like them to check with you first whether you've got, you know, if it's books by women, would you like them to check whether you've got copies of them already? Or
yes, that's a good point actually. Like all libraries, space is of a premium. So yes, if anyone wants to get in touch about donations, I'm always happy to hear. But again, it would be good to check with me first so we can check we already have them on the shelves.
Sometimes when I've stayed in a bed and breakfast or you know, there are old collections of books that are rather specific to that household or that guest house or whatever, and you find books that you never find in bookshops now, and it's absolutely fascinating. I picked the last time I picked up a biography of Florence Nightingale, and she was an astonishing woman. She was quite different from what I'd imagined. Really, really tough, really quite feisty, and extremely upper class, which I hadn't realized. So that she was actually fighting that upper class prejudice against women dirtying their hands by mixing with ordinary people or ill people in a hospital as much as anything else. And I hadn't realized that. It was just a really fascinating read. That biography, I'm sure I could have got it in a second-hand shop somewhere if I'd searched around, but it was just a lovely find. And
yeah, I think that's what's great. You know, we're getting lots of books donated continually, and lots of books that have been in the library for a long time that you would really struggle to find elsewhere now. Lots of books that are out of print, you know, or maybe on you know, women that you might not come across so regularly. So we're really keen on trying to ensure that those books are sort of together as a collection. So it makes it a really rich and kind of varied resource for people who are coming to use the library.
And now you have now a budget to employ staff. Do you have any budget to buy books now, or are you still budgetless?
Still don't have a book budget, but we're not short of stuff or books, you know. So I think I always love just thinking that the library has been built really by people's kindness and people's passions, and
That's rather
that
wonderful,
kind of makes
actually.
it a special place, I think.
That must get into the atmosphere, I'm sure.
It does. I think it exudes from the bookshelves, I think. Yeah.
Well, certainly when I came into it, it was a lovely space. It's an old library building, isn't it? But it was a more just a county library. But it's been
Yes.
used so intelligently, the space. It feels warm and open and just lovely. And your Story Cafe, let's get on to that now. Tell us about Story
Okay.
Cafe.
So Story Cafe has been running, I think, for about 8 years now, and it's a kind of beautifully simple concept, but it has, I think, can have a really big impact on the people who are coming along to the group. So it's in sort of pre-COVID times, it was we're meeting in person in the library space. We've got a lovely round table in our sort of main lending library area. And we meet round the round table. People bring food if they like to share, or they can, come in and have food. And we have a huge big teapot, so we make gallons of tea and coffee, and it really is an opportunity for women to come and just relax over lunchtime in a really sort of social way, I think. So, I think it's really important that, for some people, the idea of coming to a group that involves reading or books can be a really big step, and it can be scary. And we absolutely are not the kind of group that we're going to be analysing a book or using language that is really off-putting for people who are new to reading. So it's really about coming and just enjoying the experience of listening to stories and poems being read aloud.
Well, I think that's what's very special about it, is because there are reading groups all over the country, but what they do is people read the books on their own and then they talk about them. But your group is where you actually listen to a story being read to you, and that's very special. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's something like, if we're lucky enough to have been read to as children, I think, I can certainly remember that lovely feeling of, losing yourself in a story and listening to someone's voice, and then it's like, why do we stop doing that when people grow up? Why? Because it's a lovely, lovely experience.
We only start it again when people's eyesight goes, and then they start listening to audiobooks.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then they recover it. But
yeah.
But somehow the person there reading to you is a bit different from a recording, isn't it? It does hark back to that childhood experience, I think.
And I think it really helps. Like, some of the women in the group have said, it's really helps to kind of slow down the reading. Sometimes, if someone, I know if I'm reading and I'm like desperate to find out what's going to happen next, and so I can like skimming, but it's like if you're there and listening and you have to just wait until the person who's reading, they go at their pace. So I think it's a really relaxing experience. And I also think what's really great about it is, like you said, Marion, you don't have to read anything in advance. You don't have to, if you're coming, as we do have a project at the library where we're supporting women who need a little bit of extra help with their literacy. So it can be great for literacy learners who are coming, and because they can listen, there's no expectation to read anything. Also people who come and who are have English as a second language. So it's a great sort of way for improving conversation and listening. So I think the idea that you can just come along every week with no pressure to read in advance, no pressure to chat if you don't want to, makes it a really kind of accessible group for people.
And how many do you get each time, roughly?
We probably get I would say about 25 and 30. And sometimes when we're having special kind of author specials or a special theme, we can have up to 50. So it can be really busy. We had one last year with a lovely comedian, and for a special event, and we had about 50 women there. So it was really busy.
Well, give us an example of one which is your more normal amount. You don't have an outside speaker. It's just you and the people who come, maybe 20, 30 people, and give us an example of something that you might have read to people then. And how do you deal with the fact that it's a whole book and you're only going to read for, how long do you read for, 15 minutes?
Yes, we do. So sometimes we'll read a complete short story, or we'll read like an extract. So trying to have something that's quite kind of a complete extract, so it makes sense on its own and for discussion. But we hope that if people are like, oh, that was amazing, I love that, then they'll borrow the book from the library and go on to read it themselves. So yeah, so some of the things that we've read, let me think. What we've done, which is really a really lovely part of working with the group, is we often have people, international students, on placement with us, and who then pick something that they would like to share with the group. So we had a lovely intern on placement with us from Germany, and she picked a book, West, which is by Julia Frank, and it's set in Berlin during the Berlin Wall. And we talked about the East and West Germany and her experience of growing up in Germany. And she was able to reflect on that experience and talk about the text as well. So that was really interesting. Being able to meet someone who's grown up in Germany and talk about her experience, and also about a fictional version of that. Let's think what else. We also invite along groups who have been in the library and who have created some work to share with the group. So we were running a creative writing group for Muslim women, who then came along and shared what they'd written. So some of it was some drama and short stories, and that was amazing. And they were so popular that they've been back again to read more. So it's a way for, it can also be a sort of platform for women in the library to share some of their own work, which is great.
And when we were talking before, you said something about your own experience, as a listener, as well as a reader in the group, that you'd found things that you might not have found otherwise. So
definitely.
Give us an example of that.
Well, I can honestly say, before I started the group, I would have said I didn't really like poetry at all. I mean, even though I'd studied poetry at university, I was just like, it's not my thing. I don't really get it. And through having the opportunity to run a group like Story Cafe, I now realise I just never had read any poetry that I got or that moved me in some way. So now I'm like, I love poetry, and I've discovered loads of amazing poets that I would never have considered picking up a book.
And was that because you were looking for poems to introduce to the group, because you felt they ought to be introduced to poetry, even though you didn't particularly like it?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the way, if we're running a kind of session, we would maybe do a text, so it would be like a short story, and then I'll try and find maybe 2 poems on a similar theme,
right?
And we'll read that at the end. And I think that really complements having a bit of prose and some poetry.
And you said some of the group have written poems themselves in response to what's happened in the group. Is that right?
Yes, they have, which is lovely. Yes. And I have one here. We'd be happy to share with you, or share at the end.
Why don't you read us that one now? Tell us about what prompted
it. Great. Okay, I'll just explain a little bit about it. We had one of our volunteers actually had run a session at the group on a book by Sarah Maitland. I don't know if you've read Sarah Maitland. And her book called Gossip from the Forest, which is sort of about retelling of fairy tales and about forests. It's a really beautiful, atmospheric book. And Aileen, who's in the group, had written this poem in response about Story Cafe. So it's called Story Cafe, Into the Forest. We walk hand in hand into the forest of stories. This silver birch is a fairy tale. This sapling, a poem. Here and there, a haiku will push up small shoots. This circle is strong. We belong here. We grow. We are rooted in the earth. We learn to climb higher, to stand tall.
That's beautiful. Beautiful and very succinct, yes. Yes, lovely.
Aileen is a beautiful poet, actually.
Lovely.
Really.
And you also mentioned to me, I'm just looking at my notes here, a book about Virginia Hall that you made a big impression. Do you want to tell us about that?
Let me tell you about that book, because it's absolutely brilliant. Yes, it was a book about, we had the author Sonia Purnell came to talk about, it's like a biography of this incredible woman called Virginia Hall, who was really the Nazis' most wanted ally spy during the Second World War. But who has heard of her? You know, many people have not. I had never heard of her. She was an American woman, and it is so gripping. It's called A Woman of No Importance, and again, a biography is something I would kind of go, not necessarily something I would pick up. But I tell you, it was one of the most gripping books that I read last year. It's so unbelievable. She's so unbelievably brave, and I would highly recommend it.
Just say the title again in case people want to pick it up.
Sorry, say that again.
Say the title of the book again in case
some. A Woman of No Importance.
Okay. And the author?
Sonia Purnell.
Now, how did you discover that? Were you just looking around did you decide I'm going to do a biography now, or what was it?
No, she actually got in touch with us, and she came as a guest. And it was so fascinating being able to hear all about her research process, which involved, you know, going to the is it Langley, the big CIA headquarters, and getting access to files that, you know, really classified information. So yeah, it's a fantastic book.
Right. Well, how very interesting. And so it's kind of opened new things to you as well. It's not just that you're busy opening new things to other people. So it's a really reciprocal thing.
Yes, definitely. And what's really great about it is that there's lots of sharing about other books. If we read something, it can spark people saying, "Oh, I've read something that I think you might like," and also the sharing of our own experiences, which we often say sometimes they're, if not all the time, more interesting than the stories that we read in the books.
And in terms of own experiences, what's the sort of age profile of the people who come to the Story Cafe? I mean, if it's at lunchtime, does that mean it's mainly retired women?
We have a lot of retired women who come, and lots of women who've been coming right through from when the group started. But we do have younger women coming too. We've had some lovely mums and babies coming. So yeah, some students. So it can be quite mixed, which is really nice.
And in terms of people sharing life experiences, do you feel people are, because it's not an absolutely set group of people that you get to know week after week, is it a bit scary for people to say things about their own experiences?
Well, I think what is great about the group is that there's absolutely no pressure to do that. If that's
right,
if you don't want to do that, you know, people can share if they choose to, but people are just really welcome to sit and listen. But I think it's really testament to actually the women in the group and how welcoming they are to people who are new. That there really is a really beautiful atmosphere created. You know, we like to say there's always room at the table, and you know, you can literally see people like shifting along and making the circle bigger when as people arrive, and welcoming new people, which I think really helps to make people feel that they can share if they want to, and it's a safe space to share, if that makes sense.
And have there been any like autobiography projects that have sort of arisen from it, where people are saying, "Oh, you know, my mother used to live down there, and this happened," and then they start writing them? Has that happened?
I don't think that's happened in the group. I think some women who come to the group have maybe gone on to we do creative writing in different classes and different workshops and things at the library. So someone who've come have maybe gone on to also to come after Story Cafe and then to go on to do creative writing.
Right, and then those are classes that happen in the library as well, are they?
Yeah, yes, we'll have those as well. Yeah.
Right. And then I did see on the website something about a history walk, about women's history around Glasgow. Well, what's that?
So this is again a project that started quite a few years ago and completely run by volunteers. And we started off with one walk, and we've now got 6 walks across the city. So it's really kind of uncovering hidden history of women in Glasgow and celebrating that. So we, you know, there's so much rich history in Glasgow about women's contributions and women's achievements. And like many places, all the street names are named after men. The statues are all of men. You would think that women hadn't done anything, which is obviously not the case. So we're trying to redress that balance and to say, look at all these incredible women that we should be celebrating and we should know about. So we have the heritage walks. We also have a heritage cycle ride as well. So we do led cycle rides, and we've got we have 3 themed walks. We have, as well as sort of areas of the city, we have 2 that are focused specifically on suffragettes in Glasgow, and we've just launched a recent one which is called Stride with Pride, which is an LGBT walk, so looking at LGBT history.
And so you're walking to a place which is associated with a particular woman, and then somebody tells you the story, a bit about that.
Yes, so
that's how it goes. Yeah.
Yeah, so we have volunteer tour guides who take people out, and we've got maps that we were able to give away to people who come into the library, and we also have them downloadable, and you can listen to them as well, podcasts.
And then you've mentioned that you've got involved in things which aren't actually in the library, but because of your role as a women's library, like the Book Week in Scotland. Tell us a bit about that.
Yes, so I don't know if you have that in England. It's called Book Week Scotland. Do you have such a thing in England?
I didn't know about it.
I know there's libraries.
Some of these things are much stronger in Wales or Scotland or Northern Ireland than they are in England, because people are sort of establishing, sort of celebrating a particular identity. So it would be more likely to be something about the north of England or the West Country or whatever, rather than England as a whole, I think.
Yeah, okay. Well, we have Book Week Scotland, which we've been taking part in since it started. And I'm not sure exactly how long it's been going, but maybe 8 years. So every year is like a national celebration of reading and books, and there's lots of fantastic events, pre-events.
Are these books by Scots writers, is that it?
Not necessarily. It's just anything to do with reading and celebrating that, for all different age groups and all different types of events. Okay. So we normally run what we call Bold Types, which is a creative writing competition for women, and we're really encouraging women from, all different backgrounds, women who are maybe just taking that first kind of step into creative writing. To enter. So we have a short story and we have a poetry competition, and I've been on the judging panel for that since it started, so that I think this was my 8th year. So we have that in November, and it's a lovely competition to be part of. So we have like a panel of judges, and we have a showcase event when our shortlisted writers read out their work, and then we select a winner. And what's been really amazing is that some of our previous winners and shortlisted writers have then gone on to be published, which is fantastic.
Lovely.
So it's a really lovely, supportive competition for women. It's really nice.
And what's been happening in the library since lockdown? You're not meeting in Story Cafe anymore, so what happens to all of that?
So we have been, like you, Marion, and taking the plunge into Zoom events, which was a completely new thing for us. We have done quite a lot of digital work in terms of, we've had digital book festivals before, but most of our events were usually in the library. So Story Cafe has been moved online, and we've been not on a weekly basis, but we've been having like our special Story Cafe specials, we call them. So I just had one at lunchtime today, actually. And our theme today was, we were looking at fictional engineers with a lovely woman called Dr. Nina Baker, who was telling us all about her research about fictional engineers and women in science. So we've been sort of taking that online, which has been great in some ways, because there's been people been able to attend from, people from America. We've had people from all over Scotland coming, to be able to attend the event. And we've also been able to we had 2 amazing crime authors who came a few weeks ago, one in Canada and one in Iceland, which again, we wouldn't have probably...
You mean they were sitting there in Iceland? She was sitting there in Iceland talking to you?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So that was great. I mean, that's kind of opened up possibilities for us that way. But yeah, I mean, I will look forward to the day when we are able to sit round a table together and have tea.
And is there any, I mean, are you in a tier 3 situation? I mean, are you in a really lockdown situation where you can't have limited numbers in the library at the moment?
We were in, it's just changed this, it's just changing tomorrow, actually, Marion, what's happening. We have been closed, because we had to close under tier 4 restrictions, which we're moving to tier 3 as of Friday. I think that's right. I think that's right. But we're now closed for our sort of seasonal break now, and we'll be reopening again in January. The library is open and people can borrow. We're still not at the stage of having in-person events.
Running groups, I'm sure.
Yeah,
groups is the last thing.
Yeah.
And you mentioned early when we were talking before this interview, you mentioned a project to do with kindness. Now, what was that exactly?
Yeah, so that's been really interesting. The Carnegie Trust UK have been looking at like it's called Creating Space for Kindness, and looking at the roles of public libraries in creating kinder communities, because libraries have often been seen as like a trusted place, a place where people experience kindness. And so I've been involved in that project because I'm really interested in kindness.
And what form does that take?
So we're looking at the project was just started up just before lockdown. So I've been meeting with lovely colleagues from different libraries on Zoom, and we're all sort of planning little projects about kindness. So I'll actually going to be doing a story cafe focusing on kindness and about stories and poems about kindness, and encouraging women to share their experiences. And we're also running in our spring program, we're also going to be running we have a group called Women Making It, which is like a craft group. So we're going to be doing a focus specifically on kindness and making things inspired by kindness, and then showcasing those.
The ethos of Story Cafe includes kindness and warmth and openness already, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a huge part of the library, actually, you know. We call it our special ingredient, that when people come through the door, you know, and again in pre-COVID times, you know, we were able to offer, first thing we would do would be offer people a cup of tea and a tour of the library if they would like that. And really just, I suppose, extending hospitality and welcome to people.
Yeah, it's just a very personal touch rather than a bureaucratic touch, isn't it?
Yeah. Because I think
talking about the personal touch, how do you fit all this with being a mum of 2 quite small children?
Yes, I mean, I'm lucky that you know, working at the library can be very flexible with my hours, which has been, you know, a godsend in that sense. And having a supportive partner to be able to share responsibility with childcare. Again, he's very lucky to have flexibility in his working hours.
And are you half time or part time?
I have been mostly working 3 days, and over the past year working 4 days. So yeah, but just I think having a flexible place to work, having somebody who can support you and pick up, you know, the slack at home, do the shopping and whatnot, you know, when I'm working, I think makes a big difference. And
it's also. Let's hope that after the experience of lockdown of so many people working from home, there'll be much more acceptance of workplaces being flexible in that way in the future.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, I think it's got to be really. I think it would be hard to go back now, you know, and it does make a huge difference, you know, to be able to fit round, you know, your family life. Because
then to be able to say there are real positives about getting together in a workplace. We'll organize our work so that we're getting those positives. We're not just stuck there because it's a desk.
Yes, yeah. I think so. It'll be interesting to see how things develop there. I mean, I certain aspects from working from home I've enjoyed, but I have hugely missed my colleagues.
I'm sure.
And chatting over tea and,
And all the
actually
people
being
come.
in the library.
Yes, all the people who come, that's what it's about, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
I don't want us to go too long before we have questions, but I think it would be lovely if you read to us a little bit so that we can experience a bit of Story Cafe reading. So, you got something you'd like to read us?
I have actually got just a little piece of writing that someone who came to Story Cafe wrote about her experience. It's just one page, Marion. It's not a bit of fiction or anything, but she really kindly wrote it for me so I could put it onto the website. So if people, again, were maybe nervous or not sure what to expect coming to Story Cafe, this would give them a flavour of what it's like. So I'll read this out for you. In March this year, I first came to Glasgow Women's Library. I had been ill for the previous 15 months and was virtually unable to go out on my own. My daughter is on your mailing list, and she often said to me how many interesting things were going on at the library, which she thought I would like. So I decided that, as I was feeling a good bit better, it was time to give it a try. The Story Cafe was to be my first visit. Feeling a lot of trepidation, I opened the door and walked in, my sandwiches in my bag. But what was really amazing to me at the time was the warm welcome I got from the receptionist, and she directed me to where the Story Cafe was going to be happening. Considering I was on my own and I knew no one, I could not believe the beautiful welcome I got. Each person was friendly, and before long the table was full of goodies to eat, tea and coffee, and even china cups and saucers. I couldn't remember the last time I had tea from a china cup and saucer. We began a reading of extracts from interesting books, women eating and drinking tea and listening to a story. Wow, when do we ever listen to stories these days? In the interval, as fresh tea did the rounds, we were encouraged to talk about and discuss the things in the book that had just been read. Each opinion was valued and acknowledged, and the women all supported and listened to each other's point of view. And some of those voices had perhaps not been properly listened to before. These voices now began to be heard and valued. I always feel when I enter the doors of the library as if I have had a big, warm, welcoming hug after coming in from the cold outside.
That's lovely. Well, thank you very much, Wendy. And I think it will be really nice now if anybody would like to ask questions. And Natalie. Have we got, here we go.
Do we have to read the questions?
Does everybody see the questions?
I'm just adding in the questions. There's been quite a few coming on Q&A, so I'm just adding them onto the chat for you.
Oh, thanks, Natalie.
Natalie says, what a fantastic opportunity to ask Sonia Purnell about her research.
Yes, it was amazing. Yeah.
And she came to you with it.
Yes, yes, she did. Such a great book.
Okay, so how do you cope with people who are very well read? It's gone up a thing, who might find the group too basic, if you like.
We certainly have many women in the group who are very well read, and I think the group. I always think that accessible writing doesn't mean that something's not really well written, yes. Or talking about things in an accessible, inclusive way doesn't mean that it's basic. If you understand what I mean. So we certainly talk about and read things that are challenging and talk about and explore themes that are challenging. So some of our very well read members have facilitated the group with or chosen books and helped me select books, which is great.
Right. Now I'm getting absolutely overwhelmed by the number of chats that are zooming up this little list here. One of them is about Shoghi Bain. Has there been any discussion of that, of him winning the Booker Glasgow story?
Well, I haven't read it actually. I've
Oh,
bumped into
also, it's
people.
happened during lockdown, hasn't
It's
it?
happened during lockdown. I've bumped into some people I know in the park, and we've been talking about it on our walks. I haven't read it yet. But obviously it's written by a man, so that would be not something.
But a lot of it's about his mum.
Yeah.
His relationship with his mum.
Yeah. So it would not be a book that we would read at the library, at Story Cafe. But I think it's really interesting for a book that's written about Glasgow to certainly have won the prize this year. So I know that a lot of people have had it on their Christmas list to buy for friends and family this year.
Well, in a few months' time, we can check out and see.
Yeah.
How is the library funded? Somebody says.
We're funded lots of different ways. So we have some funding from the Scottish Government, from the local council. We apply a lot for different grants, project funding from different sort of charitable trusts. Lots of different ways. So we try and keep that diverse as possible, so we're not reliant on like one funding source. Lots of different ways. We have a friends scheme as well, so people can donate out like a monthly amount to support what we do as well.
So presumably fundraising is part of the jobs of the paid staff as well.
Yeah.
There's loads of contributions going up. Somebody is telling us that we do have a National Book Week in England.
Great.
Glad
to hear it.
Twice in May and November, and it happens in schools as well. Somebody's saying, if you were health secretary, would you put bedtime reading for children on prescription?
Oh, what a lovely idea. I think in Scotland, for instance, there's always an annual campaign by this. We have an organisation called the Scottish Book Trust, which I'm not sure maybe similar to the
I think there is
agency.
There certainly is a book trust.
There's the National Book Trust, isn't there? We have the Scottish Book Trust, who do a campaign to buy books for children at Christmas, because with the realisation and the acknowledgement, there's many children who grew up in homes who can't afford to buy books, and I think especially at the moment with public libraries being closed, a lot of public libraries being closed, a lot during lockdown, and families not being able to access books is a big thing.
Somebody has asked, are some authors better than others to read aloud? And what makes the difference?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, actually. I think I tend to read contemporary fiction. If at the group, very rarely would read like classics or those kind of texts. There's certain
and do you think, is that to do with the reading aloud aspect, do you think? I mean, the sentences are very long and the vocabulary is much broader than we use these days.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's about a lot to do with accessibility. I think there's certain writers that I return to a lot. Like Jackie Kay is one of my favourite writers. She's our national, like our Macker, our national poet. Her writing is just fantastic and
she's
beautiful.
A poet, isn't she?
She's a poet and also a novelist.
But she's also written a memoir, which is the only thing of hers I've read. Yeah.
Yes, and she's also written novels as well and plays as well. So she's she's always like if I'm looking for something and really struggling to find something, I always know I can rely on Jackie Kay.
Right. Yeah, I found her life story very interesting as well, because it's got so many aspects to it. She was adopted and mixed race and adopted by a communist couple who were very, very definite that race was not going to get in the way. But growing up as a child in such a mixture of ethoses was very interesting. Yeah. Do you agree some rules at the start of Story Cafe? Somebody wants to know. So that folk know what to expect about, how they'll be treated and how others,
Yes, we do. We we'll always do a general introduction and give people an idea of what to expect at the group. Again, for instance, like feeling that there's no pressure to speak or to people can if they want to just stay for a short amount of time, or and also we do have a sort of inclusion statement that we have been particularly using our online events as well, just in terms of like our core values of inclusion and respect and equality. So yeah.
Somebody has asked, this is Natalie asked, are there similar libraries in other parts of the UK?
Yes, there's a women's library in London.
I don't think it does things like the like Story Cafe. I don't think it's got that sort of huge number of activities and so on, does it?
It's a long time since I've been, Marion, to be honest, but I know it's in an academic institution.
I think it's very academic.
Yeah. And also there's the Feminist Library in London, which I haven't had the opportunity to visit. And who, again, I think we're set up very much by volunteers, a sort of grassroots organisation.
Where would you say the ethos comes from? I mean, you were one of the first paid staff, but there were already volunteers working there when you got there. Did it already have that ethos, do you think, when you came? Or is it something that's emerged from the workers talking about how they want it to be?
I mean, I think the library's always had a really strong ethos since it was founded, in terms of, why there was a need for a women's library and a need for a space to sort of celebrate and champion women and women's achievements. So I think it's always been very much founded in equality, and I think, our values really come from that, I think.
And did the Story Cafe idea come from you, or was it there when you arrived?
The Story Cafe idea came from, we had a sort of little pilot group running with I think someone had spotted it in the questions, actually somebody mentioned the Reader organisation. So we were working with a lovely woman who'd moved to Glasgow, was working with the Reader, who are based in Liverpool, I think. And then when she sort of finished working with us, we decided it was going really well, and we just wanted to keep the group running.
Right. And then has it always been your baby, or do you swap it around with other members of staff?
I'm really keen for other people to facilitate, and I'm really lucky that some of my colleagues love coming along and facilitating sessions. My colleague Donna, who works on our adult literacy project, she's also studying a PhD at the moment, a creative writing PhD. So she's shared her work quite a few times at it in her research. So I'm always looking for other team members to have a wee go and share what they like reading and what they're passionate about.
Now, I see somebody has asked, although you say the library is open to all, do men ever come in and take part in anything?
Yes, we have lots of men who are members who come and access our archives, our materials in our stores, and borrow books, who go on our heritage walks. Some of our events are obviously women only, but some of our events are open to all. So yeah, men are able to come to film screenings or book launches and different things.
And then what about, this is a question from me, what about books that are about women's lives and revealing, but are by men? Have you got them on your stock as well? I'm thinking of Sunset Song, for instance, which is a wonderful book.
We have books about women written by men, so it could maybe be a biography of Virginia Woolf, for instance. We don't have fiction or poetry by men.
Okay.
Because we really struggle to have space for everything we want to have written by women. So
So I have a very wonderful friend in New Zealand who runs a women's bookshop, and I think it's a similar sort of decision. It's she's highlighting the fact that women's writing is there and that it needs particular highlighting. But I think she also, obviously men are welcome to go in the shop and get stuff. But I think it is once you set up something which is specific to a group, you've always got these definitional problems, haven't you? Issues. Yeah. But the essential thing is that you're celebrating the lives of women and having a resource which is available about the role of women in society. Yeah,
absolutely. And being able to have our sort of learning that's really tied into that as well.
Yes.
All our events and learning
Yes.
are integrated with our collections. So
right. Now I see there are 4 new messages. Let's see if we've got time for a couple of them now.
nothing too hard.
Okay. Can you suggest a book if we'd like to try reading aloud?
That's a lovely question. I love a poet that I really love, who I got into since running Story Cafe, a poet called Mary Oliver, who I think all of her poetry is really beautiful, and really we read her poetry aloud a lot. She's a nature poet, and yeah, her poetry about the natural world is so beautiful.
Just say her name again.
Mary Oliver.
Okay.
She's an American poet. She just died last year, I think. Her work's really beautiful. And obviously I'm going to, of course, again say Jackie Kay.
Okay.
I love.
Okay. Well, I think we should probably bring it to an end there. We've been going for almost an hour, and thank you everybody for listening. Thank you so much, Wendy. It's been delightful to have you here and to listen to your experiences.
Thank you so much, Marion, and thank you everybody for coming.
And I hope if you're ever visiting Glasgow, any of you are out there listening, that you'll pop in and see it.
Yes, and hopefully we'll be able to make you a cup of tea by that point.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you both. That was wonderful.
Thank you, Natalie.
Thanks, Natalie.
Goodbye.
Bye. Bye-bye.